Hi there, everyone. Happy first episode of the new year, 2023. Very, very exciting. Happy to return and get started again. Thanks to everyone who watched the on contract series that I had over the Christmas holiday. I got to do the best Christmas pageant ever out at Millbrook Playhouse and met some really awesome, wonderful people. So it was fun to get to do some mini episodes with them, and hopefully get to do some full episodes with those people in the future because they were really awesome. But yeah, happy to be back and live in the new year. So yeah, lots of stuff in the works, planning. Yeah, welcome. I'm glad you're here. And also something new. Okay, I hope I'm back. Let's make sure that I am texting with my guest currently. Making sure that I am here, in fact, here. I don't know. Amazing. Thank you for confirming that I'm back. I don't know where it cut off, but that's okay. We are here. Yeah, let's go ahead and get started on this episode. The next thing I was going to mention when I went down is that I am now have a Ko-Fi page for Overtures. So I will link it in the description after the show. Any tips or donations made through the Ko-Fi will go towards what I pay to publish Overtures on Spotify and Apple Music. I hope that all of my greetings at the beginning weren't completely cut off, but that's okay. Welcome anyway. I'm glad you're here. Thanks for joining me. So without further ado, let's work on this episode. So welcome to episode 54 of Overtures. My guest today is a graduate of Wagner College with a BA in theater performance. He is an actor, director, and nascent writer, originally hailing from Southern California. Currently based in New York City, Ben is hoping to pursue his passion of creating new and devised works of theater, either on the stage or behind the scenes. Although our time together at school was only 1 year, it was plain to see how talented he was, and it's been so exciting to see him grow. So, without further ado, this is Ben Sellers. Hey.
Hey, hold on. Do you see me yet?
Yeah, I see you. Can you
Oh,
see?
am I not supposed to see myself?
No, you should be able to see yourself.
Interesting.
I can hear and see you clearly, which is really great.
Okay, well,
So,
I can see here and hear you, so who cares?
I
I just
guess we'll
didn't
go
know
with
if you had
that.
frozen. Whatever. Hi.
Hi. So sorry for all the technical difficulties top of the new year, but you
Yeah.
know,
At
we
this
make
point,
do.
I mean, we're 3 years into doing this kind of stuff. I feel like everyone's pretty accustomed to it. So
Exactly. Exactly. We're all like, well, you know, we'll get it figured out. But yeah, we were just talking how you just got back from the holidays and things, settling in. How were your holidays in California?
they were good. They were
Good.
good. It was nice to be in the sun after coming from cloudy Brooklyn. But it's I'm happy to be back for sure. I feel like now that the two main holiday breaks of Thanksgiving and Christmas are over,
Yeah.
I can actually like focus on things without like having to worry about going home or going out of town. Like
100%.
now I'm just here until the end of my lease at the very least. So
Yeah, exactly.
yeah.
Well, I hope your lease doesn't end too soon. That way you're not like running around for that as well.
No,
But, you
yeah, I'm
know,
out of here. If the earliest would be September, so I've got
okay.
time.
So
Yeah,
you've got time to settle in at least a bit
yeah,
more
yeah,
and actually focus on creative things because that's always so hard during the holidays. You're like, I have no time to think about any of this, but you know,
yeah.
it's fine. And of course, we went to Wagner together. You were a freshman when I was a senior, and I was thinking about it, and we did technically get to work on a show together before I left. The only one and only show that I've ever costume designed, Twelfth Night.
Oh, 12th night. Yeah, I was Festy the Fool,
Absolutely, you were.
of course. And yeah, you put me in what? You put me in like a little Newsies cap, and I had
Yeah,
suspenders and my own striped shirt.
it was a very
Uh,
classic looking show for everyone. I was like, we're
yeah.
pulling from everyone's closets. Let's make it no sensible time period. It's just
Oh yeah. Oh
classic.
yeah. No, that's the beauty of Shakespeare. I mean, you can just you can wear whatever you want, and it still
Yeah,
makes sense.
exactly. And I was curious, had you been in a Shakespeare production before?
I had done Midsummer Night's Dream in high school. I
Gotcha.
was Lysander, one of the two lovers.
Yes.
And but that was the second one I've done. And I'm actually speaking of Shakespeare, I'm kind of for potential summer engagements and stuff, I'm pretty
Mhm.
much only applying for Shakespeare um
Like
like
Shakespeare festivals?
festivals and companies and stuff.
Oh, that's
Yeah.
so exciting. So then
Yeah.
working on what you did in high school and that production of Twelfth Night definitely like resonated with you.
Yeah, I have a soft spot for Shakespeare that a lot of other people I feel like don't. You know, there's that
Yeah.
common thing of just people who they understand it and they understand why we learn it, but they as soon as they're done with their Shakespeare class, they're like, I don't that's not really my jam. And
Yeah.
I understand that, but to me it's just such a fun challenge. I don't know. And it's like it's fun when Shakespeare is done well, it's
Mhm.
so fun to
It really
watch. Yeah.
so much is. As someone who's been in, like, 4 productions of Midsummer, but no other Shakespeare play, I'm, like, itching I am itching to get a hands on another Shakespeare show.
Yeah.
Well, and I can also imagine working on Twelfth Night, it must have been so cool getting to combine your instrumental experience, like, getting to play music while also tackling Shakespeare, and I feel like that also probably clicked for you.
Yeah, no, I mean that's pretty much the common theme of everything I've ever done for the past 6 years is that I'm usually the guy who also plays the guitar, plays the mandolin as well. And that was fun because for 12th night I got to arrange the songs that Festi sings in that,
Right.
which was pretty fun. Um, and yeah, I just like got a little chance to like compose things, and it was cool to have that freedom.
Yeah, getting to combine, like, a different passion of yours with Shakespeare is like, "Oh, I didn't know that these could work together," but when it does, you're like, "Oh, okay, I vibe with this, I vibe with
Yeah,
this."
yeah, and it's a challenge. You know, you see a lot of Shakespearean productions that like where there's songs in the script, and they try so many different genres of music to
Yeah.
apply. Like there was that like Bollywood Midsummer at the Globe when
Oh,
I was in high
yeah.
school and stuff like that. And it doesn't always work, but it's
Right.
always cool that you can literally put any genre on top of it and see how it plays.
Well, and it's always the joke of like, when will we ever run out of concepts to apply to a Shakespearean production? Like, it's always the joke of like, oh yes, put Hamlet on the moon, like
Yeah.
that kind of thing. But going back to the beginning for you for theater, how did you first get started?
Beginning for me, it was middle school. My first big role was Sebastian Little Mermaid.
I love that.
I had a little red top hat and a red blazer. Um, and I had, my parents had never heard me sing until seventh grade. I had just never done it in front of my family, really.
Hmm.
Um, and I did like a little like summer camp thing where I sang "Soon It's Gonna Rain" from the Fantastics.
Oh wow. Yeah.
Um, and my mom and my sister were there, and they're like, "Whoa, okay." This had never seen me do anything like that
Yeah.
before. And so it started in middle school, and I just kept up with it, just like everybody else, all through high school and college.
Yeah.
And now I'm, for some reason, still sticking with it here, sitting
You're
in
like,
my
oh well,
apartment.
I guess it's still my thing.
Yeah, yeah.
Was there any like overture or light bulb moment for you of like, oh, I think I'm gonna like actually do this with my career. It's not just a hobby.
Well, my parents are both professional musicians,
Mhm.
and my dad, which is a like was very successful at a very young age. Like he joined the musicians union at 14 years old, and he
Wow,
got a
that's
full ride to
impressive.
school, and he did all this touring. He's a trombone player, and so I was kind of having doubts. So I was like, oh, like I might want to go to school for other passions like environmental sciences or whatever. And like I don't know if I want to do theater in college. And he was like, Benny, the thing is college is the last time you get to do what you love before you have to do shit that you hate. And he's like, you might as well just do it. He was because he got so lucky in the opportunities he had so young. And it was such a different time with how much
Yeah.
it cost and everything. And it was like I don't really have advice for people in this modern era, but he's like,
Yeah.
if you enjoy it, then you should do it.
I think
And
that's such a great way of phrasing that too.
yeah, because like after college, who knows what you'll have to do in order to get by.
Right.
But in college, you can do what you love and gain skills that will help you anyway. So
100%.
yeah,
Yeah, because there's so many people who pursue theater and then end up pivoting towards something else that they also equally love, but if they hadn't go to school for college or studied theater in some way, then they would be less skillful at it because what they did in theater helped them in their new career and things like that. So
yeah,
I
definitely.
definitely agree with that. And of course, you had 3 years at Wagner after I graduated. Of course, the pandemic began during that time and greatly affected the rest of your time at school. And whenever I chat with anyone who graduated after me, I always feel bad that this topic always comes up. But at the same time, be it positive or negatively, it impacted all of us and became formative experiences as artists. So, kind of a broad question, but did the pandemic change or adjust how you personally viewed theater or otherwise?
Well, I always maintain that my year was the luckiest year as
I
far
would lean towards that as well.
because we got our full freshman year, we lost half of sophomore year and junior year, and then we
Mhm.
basically got a fairly normal senior year. We got to have an in-person
Right.
showcase. We got to do shows unmasked on the main stage at Wagner, which a lot of the years older than us didn't get, and the
Yeah.
ones younger than us had to deal with it in high school or had to do their first year of college online.
Right.
So I think honestly, I was very lucky during COVID in a lot of ways. I was having trouble paying for school, and
Mm.
um, I was able to take a semester off, and it was like normal to do. Like I
Yeah.
was already, before COVID was even happening, I was considering doing that.
Mm.
And then I was like, oh man, like, because that would suck because it would just be just me, obviously. But
Yeah.
then in
Then it
COVID
wasn't.
world, then I was like, oh wow, I have other people, my friends who are also doing this,
Yeah.
which was so fortunate. Um, because yeah, I didn't really have a choice. And then another thing, I hadn't even realized that I had made all my AP things from high school carry over. I never
And so you
understood how
had the
that worked.
credits.
So I had the credits, and if I hadn't taken a semester off, I would have
They
been
were,
screwed
oh,
because
yes.
they would have taken over the classes I would have wanted to take.
Yes, I had
Um,
a similar thing. There was a
yeah,
few classes like us and above. They were told they're like, "You have to graduate during the winter," and they're like, "That's not possible in the theater department." And they
yeah,
had to go through this whole thing because 'cause they're like, "Well, your AP credits," and they're like, "Okay, take them back. I don't care."
yeah.
Like,
Like I didn't even know I sent when I because I was in high school, I had no idea what I was doing,
no.
and I was when I thought when it was like send your AP scores to schools, I was like, oh cool, they get to see that I got high scores.
Yeah,
I didn't
exactly.
realize that it was going to apply to my transcripts. And so then it was some summer time where I was out of school and I was waiting to come back, and I was talking to them, and they're like, you have 5 credits, and I was like,
And you're like,
so
"What?"
then it covered an entire semester for me that
That's
I didn't have
incredible.
to pay for or do school online at a community college or whatever.
Yeah.
So I lucked out. And
Yeah.
in terms of like even in the theater sense of how COVID affected everything, like I mean, it made everyone more grateful. Like the things that we take for granted. Obviously, that happened
Yeah.
in every way. That wasn't just theater. Um, but I mean, to me, it kind of so many people still got screwed over because of the pandemic. Like there was all those issues with actors' equity that like
Mhm.
they didn't really do enough for people paying their dues, and
Yeah.
like theaters already taking away like vaccination requirements and stuff like that. And like people are like, we went through this huge kind of chrysalis change, and then some people there's a feeling still that not a lot really changed on a
Right.
fundamental level, and it's especially hard because theaters are financially recovering so with so much difficulty
Right.
that they have even worse incentives than they did before.
Yeah, especially when, like, you're looking at theaters and they're like, "Wait, how are they not hiring understudies and swings?" And it's like, a lot of them can't afford it, and
Yeah,
so I definitely think that sense of, like, being grateful for what we have has definitely, come into play for a lot of us, especially, like, in college and otherwise who dealt with that. Because, like you were saying, having a first normal year in your freshman year and then getting to kind of get a taste of that again coming back into your senior year, that must have been a really poignant moment for a lot of you seniors getting to get back on that main stage or get on the main stage for the first time and get to perform like that again. That must have been really, not to say harrowing, because that's a negative connotation, but like meaningful.
it was. I mean, we came back the first day of senior year, and we all looked around and we were like, we feel like sophomores.
Mm,
Like, and but there was such, because of this gratitude, we we as a group were pretty close. Like we just like anytime things would come up or tensions would happen, they'd go away pretty quickly,
yeah.
just because everyone was kind of so grateful to just be there.
Right.
So a lot of like the bullshit kind of subsided a little easier than it would have
Yeah.
otherwise. And yeah, everyone just sort of realized like the changes in the dynamics from before COVID to after COVID were so huge. I mean, because everyone
I
had
bet.
changed so much, because everyone went through a really individual journey that nobody else really saw. And then we
Yeah.
all came back together and we're all like, wow, we are fundamentally different people than the ones who we might have had a problem with sophomore year of college. You know what I
Yeah,
mean? And
exactly.
so like it was kind of like a huge detox almost.
Yeah.
And that makes it sound like it was like really negative before, and it wasn't. But it was
No.
like, just like a general like kind of cleansing vibe where we were all just like, let's just do this.
Yeah.
And it felt like a very collaborative year in that way.
Yeah. Yeah, well, and then you got to play the baker in Into the Woods, yes?
Yeah.
Like, that must have been such a special project, especially directed by Michelle too, I believe.
Yeah.
So, Yeah, that show and bringing that show back to the main stage, I can't even imagine.
Yeah, no, that was great. I mean, the Baker had been a dream role of mine since high school.
Yeah.
So it was really, really fun part to play. And yeah, just like, especially the way we opened the show, where we were all on stage out of character, and Faraj as the mysterious man comes out and goes, "Welcome back," like to everybody there. And that was like a very cool feeling, like to be the first show back on the main stage with an actual audience.
Yeah.
That felt very special and very weird, you know.
Yeah.
And it was like, because it felt so normal, and
Right.
it sucked that you had to realize how normal it felt. You know, it's like,
Yeah.
man, this is what was gone for 2 years.
Yeah, when you suddenly realize you're like, "Oh, this feels a lot more like normal than I thought it would be, given that I haven't gotten to do it in 2 or 3 or however many years."
Yeah.
I 100% get that.
Yeah.
And you've also done a decent amount of work outside of Wagner, like during the summers. So one of the pictures you had sent in that I had posted on Instagram, so go check that out. But correct me if I'm wrong, was that in Forever Plaid?
I was Forever Plaid this summer. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Tell me about that show, because I feel like I'm beginning to see it a lot in casting breakdowns for lots of different theaters, and I want to know more about that show.
Okay, Forever Plaid is a crazy show. You would never. It is. The premise is so much weirder than you would ever think it would be. So it's a 4-man show. It's a basically like a barbershop-esque 50s, 60s male harmony group, like the Four Freshmen or whatever. And the premise is that these 4 guys were on their way to their first big gig, and they got hit by a bus full of Catholic schoolgirls on their way to go see the Beatles, and they all died.
Oh,
and
no.
So they went to heaven, and the first scene is us, the 4 guys, coming out with candles, like we're like singing a Latin hymn, and we go and we're looking and we're like, how long has it been? And somebody gives us the year in the audience, and we're like, oh my God, it's been 60 years. We're finally back on Earth. We've been up in like purgatory, and the whole show is about us doing the show we were gonna do in life. And then at the end, like, the guys are like, wait, if we finish the show, we have to go back. That means we're done, and we finished what we like didn't do on Earth, like Jacob Marley style.
Yeah.
And so they're all like, we don't want to do it. We don't want to do this last song. And my part has this like really huge, weird monologue at the end out of nowhere. Like the whole show is a jukebox musical with like all these old tunes. And then out of nowhere, and it's like using all these musical allegories, and it's like, no, like we have to, and it's like this allegory for death, and like this, it gets super heavy.
Wow.
And like everyone's like crying at the end, and it's so weird. But it's such a unique show because the audience exists in the world for the actors. So we're doing the show, we know the audience exists, and we're doing the show for the first time. And so every night, it's kind of like, it feels like you're improvising, which is such a relief for an actor, because
oh my gosh, yes,
there doesn't have to be polish, you know. It's like supposed to not be polished,
and there's always something that like can come up that you can react to.
Yeah,
because I felt similarly like when I've done things like spelling bee, because since the audience is a part of it, I'm like, oh, okay, I'm always going to have something to pull from and go off of as an actor. And so, yeah, I can imagine that's very much similar.
And so that keeps things really fresh. And then I do that big monologue, and we decide to do the last song, this big resounding number. You know, the show is really hard to sing because the harmonies are incredibly intricate. And we do this last song, and we bow for the audience in character as our 4 guys, and then we leave and go back to the portal, and that's it. We don't bow as the actors. We're dead, and we are done.
That's wild. I mean, like that makes sense that you kind of have to.
Yeah, but it always felt so interesting to do that show and like have these weird, incredible existential stakes.
Yeah,
while you're doing
also, like jukebox musical,
doing a silly jukebox musical where we're like playing with plungers and like talking, and we're all like dweebs who have different, like, we're all nerds who like never really got what we wanted in life because we died too young.
Yeah.
So that's a fun show, and it's a cool show because once you've done it, it's like you'll do it again and again.
Yeah, I've kind of gathered that because I've met a few people now who are like, I know how to play this specific role in Forever Plaid. So like when I see another listing for it, it's kind of like the people who like play Frankie Valley in Jersey
Yeah,
Boys. When they
it's very
find it
similar.
again, you very much keep doing the same show, or like Buddy Holly. So
Yeah,
I can imagine it's the same with Forever Plaid as well. So well, looking forward to the next time you get to do
I'm
it.
literally sending in for one in the next week or
I
so.
feel like
So
I know which production because I saw it come up on Playbill listing the other day.
yeah,
And then you've also worked at a theme park or two, correct?
yeah.
I feel like I don't know anything about what it's like to work as a theme park performer. It's a very different kind of gig than many actors are used to.
Yes. So I worked at Cedar Point for 2 summers. The first was the summer of 2020. So I auditioned and got the job. I got my notice that I got the job the day after we got sent home for COVID.
Oh my god.
And so
And
they're
you're
like,
like, "Am I still doing
well,
this?"
because at that point we're like, oh, it's got to be 2 weeks. We get an extra spring break, and like,
Right.
and then we obviously COVID worsened and everything shut down, and they were like, you still have jobs. You don't like just wait. Like some of you, and then they fired half of the live entertainment cast. I wasn't fired. They went, you still have jobs, and they were just waiting for the restrictions in Ohio to ease up.
Right.
So then in May or June, I did Cedar Point, and it was incredibly like they had all these restrictions. All of us
Mhm.
were 6 feet apart on stage,
Oh,
and
wow.
had all these. Because I played in bands, and there's a lot of different
Yeah.
performances. Cedar Point's one of the biggest ones in the country. There's
Cedar Point's
like
huge. Yeah.
it's huge, and
Yeah.
there's like musical theater esque like singer dancer roles. There's strictly dancer roles, and then the second summer they did their 150th celebration, which was
Mm.
actually the 151st because it was delayed. And it was this huge parade that led to this 45-minute long night show that was celebrating the history of the park. And it
My
had
god.
pogo stick jumpers, rollerbladers, this 40-minute long routine choreography with a guy who was in Newsies who did the choreography, and like all this incredible, like people from Disney came and they were the ones who made it.
Wow.
um, it was intense. And I was on a parade float. I was an actor. So
Yeah.
I was mic'd and I had a mullet, and I was supposed to be a dude from like the 80s riding one of their old roller coasters.
That's
Um,
funny.
but working at a theme park is very strange because my main gig was playing in bands. I played in bands both years. And the first year, we did 10 songs 4 times a day, 6 days a week.
That's wild.
And we would do the same thing, the same songs. And we were on an outside stage right next to the Panda Express. We called it Pandemic Express. And you just do the same thing over and over again.
Yeah.
And it's just country songs is what I was doing. And
Right.
so it's really kind of like a lesson in will, where
Yeah.
you have to learn how to make something sort of monotonous feel interesting over and
Yeah.
over again. Because theater, like at least if it's a longer piece, it's more interesting. You're not doing it like you're acting at least. But
Mhm.
what we were doing was just playing songs, which made it's a unique challenge, but it also pays better than most summer stock theaters.
Interesting. That's
When
interesting to know. Yeah.
when I was making $20 an hour my second summer, so I was making like $615 a week. And
That's
then
impressive.
at
Yeah.
this last summer stock gig I did, which I loved, I made like $240 a week. You know,
Yeah.
so because
Very
it's a
different.
big corporation, they have a lot
Yeah, they have the
more.
money to be able to do that and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
So I think it's definitely a unique experience, and particularly like learning your own stamina. Because when you're
Yes.
doing that many shows a day, like there's a certain amount of self-care you have to do for your like physical body, but also like your voice. And
Yeah.
like that's yeah. I
Yeah.
feel like you definitely learn a lot as that I know a lot of people stay away from theme parks because there's like, I can't do it. And I understand that, but I'm sure you also
Yeah.
gain so much from it.
Yeah, you do. You learn very interesting things. And because, I mean, that first summer, it was just my band as like a little pod. And so
Yeah.
it was just us the whole summer through, which like obviously we got super close, but it was a very interesting vibe to have that. And I mean, and for like the dancers, they have such a different experience than a musician would because they're
Right.
doing really intense choreography like 3 or 4 times a day. And then the second summer they do the parade and the night show. And so these were like incredible athletes
Yeah.
who are just like coming from colleges all over the country. A lot of them are like living in New York now, or they're on cruise ships, or they're on national tours.
Yeah.
A buddy of mine, he's currently Judas in the national tour of Jesus
That's
Christ
sick.
Superstar, and stuff like that. So there's real talent there because for them it's just a summer gig where they can make way more money doing entertainment stuff than they would at a summer stock theater.
Yeah. That 100% makes sense. Yeah. And I was saying this before we went live, but I dug up an old clip of you. And of course you will recognize it when I bring it back up. But back when Twitter was doing a bit better and was a bit stronger, Hadestown had just gotten traction on Broadway and they held a #WaitForMe challenge. And your video kind of popped off. So I'm just gonna bring it up and we can watch it.
Well, it's a good thumbnail.
Wait for me, I'm coming. Wait, I'm coming with you. Wait for me, I'm coming too. I'm coming, wait for me. I hear the walls repeating, the falling of my feet. It sounds like drumming, and I am not alone. I hear the rocks and stones echo in my soul. I'm coming.
It's such a good song for you. And I know that clip's a little bit older, so you're probably like, oh, geez, but you sound really good on it.
Thanks, Laura. Yeah, I mean that I went to the equity principal audition for that at Pearl Studios.
Yeah.
And it must have been February. It was sophomore year when I came back. So it must have been February 2020.
Yeah.
And I was the first one there because I got right off the plane from California.
Oh my gosh.
At about midnight, and I took the A to Penn Station and had no winter clothes in the middle of February. And so I was the first one there at like 2:33 in the morning. Because I was like, if I'm going to do this, I got to be the first one there to at least have a chance, because that's how that works with the list and everything.
Right.
And so I got there and I changed in a Taco Bell Cantina bathroom and I put on like 5 shirts and like 2 pairs of pants. And I walked outside and started waiting. And 30 minutes later, a girl comes up with her dad and she's like, whoa, how early did you get here? Like I was the first one here the last 2 nights in a row. And I was like, I got here at like 2:30. She was like, whoa. And so her dad, I was freezing. I had wrapped a shirt around my head because my ears were so cold. I looked like probably a crazy person.
Yeah.
And
oh my God.
And so her dad left to some like 24-hour store and came back with just cups of hot water so we could just hold cups of hot water. And I waited that whole time until 10 in the morning, I think is when it opens.
Yeah.
I can't remember. And I was the first of the list and I went in and I was like, cool, now I can leave and go get some food. And I went and then I came back and I fell asleep on a bench in Pearl Studios because I was so tired. I hadn't slept and that was like, I barely fell asleep. I was like, kind of like conked out and didn't really sleep. And then the girl who was second came up and was like, did you ask if they're taking non-equity? And I went, "Oh, no, I didn't." And she went in and came back out. They're not taking equity.
No. So after all of that,
I was just like, "Oh, okay." And then I got up and I was staying with a family friend in Brooklyn because it was a few days before school was starting.
okay, yeah.
And so I showed up and they had never met me before. They're a friend of my dad's. And I was like, "Hi, can I sleep
Dead.
on your couch?" And they're like, "Yeah, sure." It was like 4 p.m. and
Oh my
I hadn't
god.
slept in about 30 to 34 hours.
Oh
And
my
and
god.
I slept on their couch and I was like, "Well, okay."
That's so sad.
I know,
Oh my
but all
god.
that to say is like, I mean, Hades Town, it's almost hilarious how like I type into that so well. I mean, it's like
Yeah.
it's the skinny white dude who plays guitar and sings high, so it's
Yeah.
like, well, I mean, and I mean, I fell in love with the music of that in high school when it was the previous workshop versions,
Right.
um, like well before Reeve Carney was involved, and so I mean, I love that show very much, and I'm very glad it's so successful too.
Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah,
And hey, who knows? We'll see you. I'm sure we'll see you doing that show at some point. Like
yeah,
whether it's regionally or otherwise or Broadway, like that you're definitely built for that show. Um
yeah.
and of course you're an instrumentalist, you play guitar. We've seen this in so many other things. But you also play other instruments, right? I know you're saying mandolin. Is it those
Yeah.
two or some other ones as well?
I mean, I dabble. I mean, the guitar is the main one. That's the one I can like comfortably read for.
Yeah.
The other thing I did this last summer, along with Forever Plaid, is I played in the pit of Bridges of Madison County,
Oh, that's sick.
which is a very fun show to play guitar for.
Yeah.
So I played guitar and lead guitar for that. But I play mandolin, piano, banjo, are my main ones, but they're kind of like subsidiaries to guitar, which is what I've mostly been focusing on in terms of like writing and composing too. So
Totally. Did theater and singing come first for you, or was it instruments too? Because you're saying your parents are musicians.
yeah, well, I mean, they put their kids at piano lessons, but I'm self-taught on guitar.
Mm,
Singing came first, and then I wanted to learn guitar so I could have something to sing along to.
yeah,
So I learned guitar. I first started playing in about junior year of high school. So I've been playing
gotcha.
for a little under 6 years now.
That's really impressive, especially being self-taught as well.
Yeah, I just wanted to sing along with stuff, and so that just means you have to keep chugging away at it.
Yeah, 100%. And you were saying that you write music. What genres do you say you write in? Like indie, musical theater?
Um, I right now, because I've put out two like demo albums. They were both in 2020,
Yeah.
and they were just kind of like weird, like kind of like acoustic guitar crap that was recorded. Like one of them was recorded in the woods, and one of them was recorded in a classroom at my dad's school, and like, they're very like not they're very raw. They're not
Yeah.
polished at all. And right now, like you mentioned musical, like writing for musical theater, and that's what I'm
Mhm.
trying to figure out is how to, like, I have like ideas in my head of like song cycles and what have you that are
Mhm.
guitar centric,
Right.
um, and how to change what people consider to be the musical theater sound,
Yeah.
because I am just kind of tired of it. It's its own thing, it
Yeah.
has its own value and worth, but like for me, um, I think there's such a broader scheme of music that can be used to tell stories in theater that people I think are just scared of because it's not as accessible.
Yeah.
And so my goals right now is like I've been writing a few things and just jotting down and brainstorming of like how to make something new on
Yeah.
guitar for like in a theater performance setting, basically.
Yeah. No, and
Yeah.
I think that definitely makes sense because I mean, going into like the theater history of it, blah blah blah. But like even when Rent came out, like in the '80s, everyone was like, "This isn't musical theater. This is rock." And now we think back on it, we're like, "No, Rent is definitely musical theater." So I think it's interesting that you say that because then shows like Hades Town brand new sound.
Yeah.
But at the same time, we're starting to accept, oh, this is musical theater. And
Yeah.
you're talking about Bridges of Madison County, like you're getting like Bright Star and things like that are bringing in different sounds to musical theater. So I think it's definitely possible. And I'm excited to see where your exploration with it goes.
Yeah.
Because I know you're on more of like that, it like I would say like indie acoustic side, like very much that kind of style. So I'm interested to see what you will decide to bring in with it, be it song cycle or musical or
Yeah, I mean,
whatever.
I'm far from the first person to ever say something like that. That's a common
No,
sentiment.
for sure.
Dave Malloy, the guy who did Great
Yes.
Comet, and
Yes.
he put out an essay a while ago that was like kind of like his complaints about musical theater, and it's all about like there's no longer, it's not even considered music like a lot of other genres. Like you consider rock a genre of music, you consider
Right.
rap, you consider, and then musical theater is kind of its own thing.
Yeah.
And he's like, in a way, he's like, I want people to care less about understanding every single word and instead focus on the music and how it makes people feel and how it makes them relate to things. Because and you can see that in his work. His work is super weird, and you don't catch everything, which a lot of people resent in musical theater, because musical theater, the reason it sounds the way it does is so it can put so much emphasis on hearing everything.
Right.
But then it sacrifices musical authenticity and it becomes a musical theater sound.
Yeah.
And I think it would be cool to have music in theater that you could also just listen to as music.
Yeah.
You know?
100%.
Because they're considered two separate things right now. And they have been.
Yeah.
And so it's a challenge because you don't want to give up comprehension and telling a story. So how do you do that with non-musical theater-esque ideas in music?
It's funny. It is. And it's also funny because that makes me think of then like musical theater's relationship to jukebox musicals, because we're so often pulling from what is considered popular music to use on stage. And so then I'm like, so why I'm excited to see more of like, what if musical artists as a whole look towards a show or something and go, oh, that's cool music, and somehow use it for their own work. Like I think a Larry Ward like created like a whole album of like Sondheim music, but did it in her own way. So I think that's an interesting conversation. I don't know that I have like further to like extrapolate out of that, but
it's hard. It's really, it's a challenge, and I'm not claiming I know how to do it at all. I don't.
No.
I'm like I'm sitting with my guitar and I'm like, what the fuck am I trying to do?
Yeah.
Like, and it's just, I feel like people are really tired of what's currently on Broadway. For the most part. I mean, there are really cool exceptions. Strange Loop is a cool exception.
Yes.
In terms of sound, not really. It has a kind of classic musical theater-ish sound, kind of stripped down. But in terms of subject matter, obviously very unique and personal. And when I watched it, I loved it. And I got almost sad because I was like, this is one of the only like weird things on Broadway. You know, everything is so, I mean, what's like Bad Cinderella?
Yeah.
It's coming out.
I know. It's
Phantom's extending its run.
Right. Like I've had this conversation with others before, but it's like it's the whole coming back from the pandemic, producers are scared to put their money towards things that are weird. And I'm like, yes, but also I don't know. Have you seen Theater People? We very much are for the weird shit. So
well, I mean,
let's go for it.
Theater people are, but like the rich,
general public,
white, liberal people, they just
who pay the money.
Who pay the money and invest in the shows and get the orchestra seats. Like that's what I've been struggling with too, is like how do we create a better audience? Because this is something Fran Lebowitz talks about, if you know, from Pretend It's a City and stuff. I mean, she's been around for forever.
She's hysterical.
And she has this old quote where she's like, because of the AIDS crisis, we lost an entire generation of aesthetes, of artists, and largely, I mean, like like the queer theater people of that
Mhm.
era were dying off so rapidly that we lost a
Yeah.
whole generation of good, smart, well-read audience members.
Yeah.
And so then the lowest common denominator changed. And that sounds so elitist because it's like we want to also give things to people who don't have a lot of experience with theater or with art.
Yeah.
Like we want somebody to come into a Broadway theater for the first time from the Midwest who have never been, and they're digging their first trip to a big
Yeah.
theater city like New York. And you want them to love it.
Yeah.
And so it's like, how do you cater to those two very separate ideas? And it's like you have to, I feel like if you make, because a lot of what people resent about musical theater is the sound.
Yeah.
They hate that it's like the classic cheesy like 4-bar intro where it's like they're talking to somebody else and they break into
Yes.
song.
Yeah.
And it's like, why are you singing? Why does it sound like this? This doesn't sound like the music I listen to.
Right.
Which is one of the reasons why jukebox musicals are so popular, because people
Right.
can come and they're like, this is the music I listen to. But how do you get that recognition without using songs that have already been written by other people?
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know?
And I think it's interesting talking about audiences in particular, because right now that's how I see the difference between Broadway and off Broadway right now. Because there's lots of cool, weird shit off Broadway. And I feel like a lot of like the New York theater people in particular are like drifting towards like, I mean, not drifting towards like a lot of New York theater people have always loved off Broadway because it's weird and cool. But I think we're starting to realize, oh, some really creative stuff is starting off Broadway. Let's support it there. And then things grow. Like, for example, Kimberly Akimbo started off Broadway. A Strange Loop started off Broadway. So I think there's something there that can be uncovered, which
I agree.
I think is really cool and
Yeah,
exciting.
it's not hopeless. It's just, I mean, a lot of it to me, when I try to do the math in my head, it requires such a vast restructuring of how the world works in
Yeah.
order for the art that I would want to see, and even the art that I wouldn't want to see.
Yeah.
Like, but stuff that would deserve to be seen. How that can be successful and come to fruition. Because there's so many things way above my head and above my pay grade that influence that kind of things.
Exactly.
But I think it's good to talk about, especially with like fellow young theater people who like might one day be the people who make those decisions.
Mhm.
Because I mean, theater's never going away. It's
Mhm.
just gonna change and change and change as it
Yeah.
should.
Yeah, and as silly as it sounds, like thinking to like Sondheim's "Merrily We Roll Along," that was the worst flap considered ever, and look where it is, off Broadway.
Yeah.
So
And
yeah,
we're doing a Broadway transfer too.
exactly.
It's gonna be on
It's gonna be
Broadway
on
again.
Broadway. So I think it's a very interesting like full circle conversation, and I'm realizing we've talked so much and it's so exciting. We have about like 10-ish minutes before we finish up, but I want to make sure to talk about this. So you recently moved to Brooklyn, and you've been doing some awesome things, getting in on photography and stuff like that, but you've also been focusing a lot of your time on developing your creative values and process. And given that this is the first episode of the new year, I think it's a perfect thing to talk about. This is a like hard going into it, but like what's that process been like for you to start going through your values and process?
It's like I sat down a few weeks ago and I tried to like write an artist statement just for like the shits and giggles or whatever.
Yeah.
And it turned into this dialogue I was having with myself where I would type something, I'd be like this, and this. And then I'd type, this sucks. Why are you saying this? Start over. Let's hear it again. New way. Change it. And then I'd write something new. Repeat. But what I kept coming back to writing that was, I think the idea of questions instead of answers. Like, I don't think good theater should have answers. I think it should have good questions.
Yeah.
Instead, because you can feel it so acutely when a piece of art has an answer for you to
Right.
get, which is not necessarily always a bad thing necessarily.
No.
Sometimes it's good and it's simple, but like a show that has questions, or not a show, any piece of art that has questions as a theme that like leaves things open, stuff that's challenging, not for the sake of being challenging, but because it can't not be challenging.
Right.
Um,
It has questions that it's curious about.
yeah,
and
there's a curiosity
it's an
to
investigation.
it. Yes, and so that was a big part of it. And then a lot of what I've been thinking of is like this idea of taking up space, and giving space, because people who look like me have had a very easy time in the theater world for a long time. And there are people who are part of underrepresented groups in theater that I want this era to be their time.
Yeah.
And then I'm like, it comes between my own sense of like, I want to be doing cool things. How much stuff do I have to take before I can give is kind of like what I'm feeling, because you can't give with nothing.
Right.
You have to be in some sort of position or have some level of success where then you can foster the things you want to see.
Right.
And that's always been that's a tricky conversation to have, where like I'm trying to be very critical of myself.
Yeah.
And trying to hear a lot of different things that I wouldn't normally be hearing, and to find the joy in that of self-criticism, which is very hard. And I think that's been one of my biggest challenges. Is right now I'm kind of like in this rut where I'm like, man, I'm here, I'm paying all this rent, I'm not doing shit, I'm just like trying to write, like I'm trying to get a serving job, I'm trying to, and how do I want to go about my own path in my career and make sure I'm not stepping on any heads?
Yeah.
Is something that's a big priority for me. And so that's something that I can't have the answer for myself. I need to listen and hear it and discover it through other people and their artistic journey and what have you.
Yeah.
So like that's been a lot of what I've been like kind of in my room, laying in bed, staring at the ceiling, thinking about a lot. Yeah, I guess that's a long meandering answer.
No, but I think it makes sense, because we're all like asking these questions and going, okay, now what do I do with all of this thought process that I just had? And one, like, I guess, quote unquote, concrete way that this has helped you, I know you were saying that this has helped you like figure out priorities in terms of self-tapes and like figuring out, okay, what do I personally want to submit for and things like that. And I 100% feel you on that. Why put my time towards something that I know that I'm either not right for? That's a tricky one to say, or that I wouldn't be happy doing. Yeah. And I think that's a huge part of where those questions can be helpful once you start asking them for yourself.
Yeah.
And obviously this journey of focusing in on your personal craft isn't something that you can do in a week. It's always ongoing. And is there anything in particular that has inspired you to ask all these questions of yourself?
I mean, just being in New York inspires you to ask a bunch of questions, because you don't want to be cold and you stay inside and you look out the window and you're like, man, what am I doing? I'm in that state. I'm right out of undergrad and I'm like having that sort of fun panic about my life. And which will never go away probably. But and drawing inspiration, I think, from honestly non-theater things a lot of times. Like I've always been against that old saying of like, if you can do anything else, you should. Like I've never really. I'm like, yeah, I could do other shit. What do you mean? Like I could do other things, and maybe I will. But letting other parts of the world outside of the theater world inspire you. I mean, especially me, who like a lot of the works I want to create are sort of like politically minded in a way, and taking inspiration from actual working people
Yeah.
instead of like the theater world, which is a bunch of working people, but in a very different context.
Right.
I mean, when I think of Hadestown and how it's a show that's all about working rights, and then the cheapest tickets are $200 or whatever,
Right.
it's like accessibility and economic accessibility and taking inspiration from working class people, I think, is a big part of what I'm looking at and kind of learning to write about and learning to explore and what I'm trying to make.
Well, and some of the best works come out of exactly that. I think of Sweat by Lynn Nottage. I think of Proof by David Auburn.
Mhm.
100% it does. And I'm obviously we're all in that place of like we don't know what we're doing. But do you have any advice for others who are trying to start asking those questions of themselves or starting to find that self-criticism, as you were saying?
I went to Evanston Salt Cost Climbing. It's a new play by
Yes.
Will Arbery that's at the Signature Theater, and there was a talk back at the show I went to, so I stayed, and I asked Will Arbery and Danya Tamor, like, what is your advice for like people new into this world? And I was like asking for a friend, you know, and Danya said, you have to find the people to surround yourself with, which you hear a lot.
Of course.
And she's also Julie Taymor's niece, so I don't really know how that, but she's a bit of a nepo baby, honestly.
Yeah,
but she's great.
Like,
she's great. She's great. And Will was like, it took me a long time to learn to find the lie in what I was making. Like, and to find, like, to read through a draft and be like, this is a lie. Like, this is a lie that this is the truth of what I'm trying to put out. And I'm sacrificing something to make myself comfortable or whatever. And so I've been thinking about that a lot recently, of where is the lie in my own like perspective, and what are my blind spots?
Yeah.
And to it, for Donnie's thing, it was like, how do I find the people I want to create stuff with? That's honestly the hardest part in a lot of ways, to like really, it just takes time.
Yeah.
Which sucks, because I'm bored and I want to do cool stuff, and I have to just
You're like,
figure
now I
shit
gotta
out.
now I gotta go find people. What do you
I gotta go
mean?
find people. Can't they just come here? You know, like, what
that
the
just
hell?
takes so much time.
I
Like, what the
know.
heck?
Like, come on, guys, I'm right here.
And then I have to go through the whole process of figuring out if I can collaborate with them.
I know. It's
Lord.
it's so much growing pains.
Yes.
And you think of so many people who have found success, and they're like, they didn't really get a break until well into their 30s.
Yeah.
And I'm like, man, like,
but I have so much energy to do things right now.
I know, like, I just have to kind of suck it up and put my, like, just keep going, I guess.
Yeah, I understand those post-grad feelings of what the hell am I doing? So no, you're not the only one. And I think all of this conversation has been incredibly valuable, and it's crazy. We're essentially at the end of the episode. Where can people find you on social media and things like that?
I'm on Instagram, Ben Sellahs, Sellahs. I've been debating changing that for years, because some people actually think that's my last name, and I'm like, ooh, maybe for like
maybe
like a branding sake, but then like, I don't really care that much about social media. That's the only one I have that anybody should willingly subject themselves to. Other than that, stay away.
No, fair enough.
Find me. I'm not gonna I was just about to jokingly give my address, but that's probably not a good idea.
No, don't dox yourself.
Like, hey, come over. Like, this, what I said, and be like, why aren't people just showing up asking to do shit? Like, come on, here's my address. Come show up.
No. Oh my God. Yeah, please don't dox yourself on the live internets.
Fine. Insist.
Amazing. You can find me on Instagram and I guess Twitter sometimes at Lora_Marjoram and my website, www.lauramarjoram.com. You can find this show on Instagram at Overtures Show. That's where I post upcoming guests, clips from episodes. All the relevant information is there. And if you're listening to this episode, you're either on YouTube watching live, maybe, yay. If that's the case, congrats, welcome. Or you're listening to it after the fact on Spotify and Apple Music. So thanks for supporting in all of those places. Comment, say hi, subscribe, follow, all of those good things. Continue the dialogue. I want to give people shout outs. So like, I don't know, leave a rating on Spotify and Apple Music. We'll say hi. And then of course I have the Ko-Fi page that I will put a link to below and I will probably announce about later in the week on Instagram. My next stream is actually a week from today on the 11th at 7 p.m. With an old friend from theater camp that I went to theater camp with, who is now turned comedian, and his name's Ezra Stormont. So we'll have a fun chat next week. But yeah, Ben, do you have any final thoughts for viewers live and in the future?
Oh man. Oh,
I know
God.
it always too much, and I'm so sorry.
Oh, should I give my Venmo? No, I won't do that. In that case, no.
Perfect. Unless it's paying you. No.
Yeah,
that's
no,
it.
unless you're paying me, you're not getting a word out of my mouth.
Amazing. And with that, thank you everyone for watching, and we will see you next time. Bye.